I'm Caitlin Matson-Levy, and this is The Green Room. We welcome Maestro Daniel Hege in with us today from the Wichita Symphony Orchestra. We also have a really special guest artist, soprano Courtenay Budd, who is performing the Samuel Barber Knoxville Summer of 1915. Welcome the both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Caitlin. Great to be
Thank
Daniel,
here.
you.
this is the second consecutive year that the symphony is experimenting with what they call Symphony 360. What does that mean?
Well, what it means is 360 is the idea of surround or a complete circle, making 360 degrees. So this was born out of the realization that we could not perform in the Wichita Symphony regular space in Century 2, which is the concert hall, because the lift was being repaired. This was last year. And so we thought, well, where else could we go? Because we have this date already set aside. I said, why don't we go to the convention center? And then in the committee meetings, it was poo-pooed because the stage in the convention center is not the greatest. I said, no, not on the stage, on the floor. And we can put the audience around the orchestra on bleachers so they're elevated a little bit. And we thought, well, that's a bit of a stretch, but we tried it. And it's basically making lemonade out of lemons. What we first thought were lemons actually became something really interesting, a kind of a fascinating concept for people to have a different vantage point to listen and hear the orchestra from literally around the orchestra, hence Symphony 360.
And you can sit, and it's close. You are not far away. I
Right.
mean, you have the rows are right up there against every angle of the orchestra.
Yes, because I remember when Holly was performing last year, she was performing part of the Philip Glass violin concerto, and she could almost step on the person's toes right in front of her. I mean, it was that the people are that close to the stage. So it is right up close, and I think that's a unique experience that people will have experiencing the orchestra.
Symphony 360 is next Saturday, July the 23rd at 7:30 in Convention Hall. That's a big difference
Mhm.
to remember.
It
And for
is.
tickets, you can go to wichitasymphony.org. What else is on the program? Or what is on the program besides the Samuel Barber?
Well, it's a really great program. Because we start the program. The first half of the concert is with two American composers. The first piece is by Adolphus Hailstork, African American composer who's about 80 years old, still with us. We're very happy to have him as part of this program. It's a string piece called Sonata da Chiesa, which means basically for the church. It's not a religious piece. It's just that he's hearkening back to his childhood when he loved singing in cathedrals. So he wanted to create that kind of sound, that kind of spirit. It's about a 20-minute piece, like I said, just for strings, but it's so gorgeous and evocative. It's very much like Ralph Vaughan Williams, the Thomas Tallis
Oh, is
piece. It
it
has that
really?
that kind of beautiful singing lyrical textures in the strings. So we start with that piece with Adolphus Hailstork, and then we move to Samuel Barber, another great American composer who wrote this Knoxville 1915, summer of 1915 with Courtney. And then the second half of the program is Schubert's Fifth Symphony, which is a very Mozartian kind of piece we can talk about in a little bit.
Courtney Budd, where do you live? Where do you come to us from?
I live in New York State in Poughkeepsie, New York. Hail originally from Georgia, went to college in Tennessee, where James Agee, the writer of the text of this piece, actually spent some time. So it's very close to my heart.
And it's part of your repertoire. It's something that you've performed with symphonies around the country.
Yes, yes. I was reflecting on that, and I can't remember the first time I sang it. Actually, it's been several times over the years, over probably 25 years of my career. And I was actually thinking, if there's one piece, but if I had to choose one piece to sing for the rest of my life, this just might be the piece. That's a hard choice to make, but it's deeply personal for me, to borrow Daniel's word, evocative, that he used for another piece on the program. text is, extremely evocative of natural memories that I have from my own youth, as well as personal feelings about my family,
Yes.
about moving on, and yeah,
Yes. It is
very
stunning.
beautiful piece.
And what a
Yes.
perfect atmosphere to share it with the audience. Um, how do you think it will change your experience having an audience in 360, essentially theater in the round, and up right
Yeah.
very close to you? You can spit on them.
Right. That's it. That's a great question. Yeah. I was actually thinking maybe I should rethink what I'm planning to wear based on what he said. Um, yeah. Well, it's such a storytelling piece. I mean, when you read AG, you just want to savor the words. You want to hear them over and over. I mean, for instance, even there's several times when he'll say something and he'll tweak it just a bit. He'll re-say it a few times with just slightly different arrangements, or a few more words, a few less words. Um, and I think it's nice when it's very intimate like this, to have people that you can, as a performer, you always, it's a give and take with an audience. It's much, I much prefer to sing for an audience who's there than sing for a recording,
Yes.
for instance. But you definitely, there's a back and forth with the energy. And if you can see their faces and smell their perfume, as long as you're not allergic, that can certainly be all part of the experience, can
We'll
make it
be
richer.
we'll be back to talk more with Maestro Daniel Hege from the Wichita Symphony Orchestra and soprano guest soloist Courtenay Budd. The Allegro from Schubert's Fifth Symphony, that is programmed on next Saturday's concert with the Wichita Symphony Orchestra, their Symphony 360. And I am joined in the green room by not only Maestro Daniel Hege from the symphony, but also guest soprano Courtenay Budd, who is performing Samuel Barber's Knoxville Summer of 1915, a stunning piece of vocal music. I want to talk with you a little bit more, Courtenay, before we kind of move on and talk about other pieces on the concert. You had spoken to us about how very personal and important this particular piece of music is.
Mm.
I'm curious, are there other pieces, other maybe a song cycle, maybe even an operatic role, something that you kind of claim ownership of, something that feels so very real and kind of a part of you that you also perform often?
It's a great question. I gravitate toward American song, and this piece in particular. I mean, I can go on and on about how and why it feels. I feel so connected to, and I also have connections, through my mentor with Samuel Barber, two of my mentors with Samuel Barber himself. But so there, there's more on that. Gosh, to think on that a little bit more, Caitlin. I'm overwhelmed by where to begin.
I
Just,
understand,
I
and
just
it's a
want,
bit of an unfair question.
well, can I just jump in and just say we're so happy to have Courtenay back because she sang on the Britain War Requiem just a few years ago when we were commemorating that 100th anniversary of the armistice in 2018, just a few pre-pandemic times.
Seems like just
And
yesterday somehow.
and that is a major role for soprano in that work, and Courtenay did just an amazing job with it. So we're just really excited to have you back with the orchestra and for our audiences to
thank you.
enjoy your singing again.
The
Thank
concert
you. I'm excited to be back.
The concert ends with Schubert's Fifth Symphony. What can you tell us about the Fifth Symphony and how, you know, the symphony and you, Daniel, have such a lovely, brilliant way of connecting all of your repertoire together in an evening where it might not make sense at first, but once we've experienced it, it makes complete and total sense. So could you tell us a bit how, in your mind, how these three pieces work together to create an evening or a story?
Sure. If you really, I mean, what I find is an interesting thread throughout, even though the pieces are very different from each other, is there's actually this thread of youth that goes through each piece. because the Sonata da Chiesa by Hailstork was written for a high school orchestra originally. So it was a commission in 1992 for a high school. So there's
Oh,
first youth. Now let's look at Samuel Barber and the Summer Knoxville. This is when James Agee was thinking back to when he was 6 years old. 1915 was when he was 6. And then even the year after that he felt like that there were some major points in his life at that point that made him kind of start to evolve even towards adulthood as he looks back on it. So obviously he didn't write it when he was 6, but he's reflecting back on that time. So that's the other youth. And then Schubert wrote the Fifth Symphony when he was about 19 years old. So a year out of our high school age
it's pretty
would have
young.
been that time. Yeah, it's very young, and it's already his Fifth Symphony. And as we know, Schubert not only wrote so much music, but all of that music is also really great too. So to have the sheer volume of his works and also on such a high quality is amazing. But he was 19 also. So we have youth really through each one of these pieces.
Wonderful.
And it should, hopefully the audience will feel that kind of exuberance in the way we perform it, and just hearing these three pieces side by side with each other. So I do think a program works best when there is a lot of contrast for the ear. You know, when you can hear different colors and completely different types of sounds. So with just the strings in a variety of ways, because the Sonata da Chiesa by Hailstork is about 20 minutes, but it's in about 7 movements. They're very short, and they're slow and lyrical. They're quick and kind of peppy. And then we go to the Samuel Barber, which is just a different world. You actually step into this completely different atmosphere. And then we come back to the second half with the Schubert. And this Schubert piece was actually written when Schubert was rather infatuated with Mozart's works. And so it is very Mozartian, you might say, in its spirit. It's probably the smallest orchestra that Schubert has ever written for all of his symphonies. And it just has that feeling of Mozart in it, even though it's absolutely Schubert. So
It sounds
there's
like
your
a
theme.
wonderful, intimate evening. Uh, Again, for more information, go to wichitasymphony.org. And while you're at the Symphony website, you can read all about next season, which has been announced. And I saw something just today about another Botanica concert. Daniel, what is that about?
Well, we've been performing at Botanica now a couple of times, last year in May, and then this most recent May in 2022 on the Grand Lawn out there. And it is a superb outdoor venue. It is just really great. It's so beautiful because you have Botanica right there. And the stage is made for the orchestra and, of course, other groups to perform there. And we're performing on September 30th coming up, another full program with the symphony orchestra, but it's going to be a little bit lighter program. We're going to have some film music. We're going to do, the first half is going to be feel like a lot of chestnuts that we'd like to perform. So it's going to be a great evening outdoors on September 30th. That's a Friday evening at Botanica. I just want to mention, we didn't used to perform during the summer, like ever, the Wichita
I know,
Symphony.
and now suddenly we're all used to it. We're used to
Exactly.
you having offerings all
Exactly.
throughout the summer.
Well, the Twilight Pops in late May
Was the end.
was the end. And when that was done, we didn't see anyone until October. But because of the pandemic, we
Yeah.
thought, well, we can perform outdoors like in late spring before it gets too warm, or in early fall before it gets too cold. And with the pandemic, being outdoors helped the idea of not having the air stream from other humans just right close by.
Yeah.
So again, it's another point where the lemons of having pandemic actually opened some doors, and now that we're getting out of that a little bit, but now we're thinking, hey, summertime might be a good time to try some things. So that's why we're very excited to do this concert next week, and then the concert coming up in September.
Thank you both so much. Courtenay Budd, soprano. This is not her first time performing with the Wichita Symphony Orchestra, so we can call her an old friend.
Mhm.
Singing Samuel Barber's stunning Knoxville Summer of 1915. If you've never heard it performed live, This is your opportunity to do so. It really is very special. And then also on the program, Adolphus Hailstork's Sonata da Chiesa and Franz Schubert's Symphony No. 5. Daniel Hege and Courtenay Budd, thank you and have a fantastic performance next Saturday.